Hello and welcome to a Salford Weekly and Broadsheets special. I've got Ciara in the studio today. She's our local radio expert. How are you, Ciara?
I'm very, very good. This is my favourite topic to talk about. So,
I mean, you're wearing the Shock Radio hoodie and you're also involved in Roach Valley Radio. Could you tell me a bit about them both?
So Shock is the student radio station for Salford Student Union, and we broadcast to Salford online, but everywhere. And we do a lot of Salford-based things and a lot of things that are based around the SU. But my role at Roach Valley has changed slightly, but it's very much we broadcast to Rochdale, Bolton, Oldham and Bury, and it's a lot more, it's not students, it's more of older people who have got into radio just randomly or love radio. It's definitely a station that is aimed at older people, but the local element is so important because we do a lot of events and stuff like that.
So what got you into local radio?
So, I started liking radio through sort of national radio about 12 years ago, I'd say, so very early on. But the thing that got me into local radio and being interested about that is I went into the BBC in Birmingham, I want to say 10 years ago, and I was took on this tour and they took me into the radio studios, and because I was very, very geeky at the time, I knew how the whole desk worked and I thought it'd be really funny, and I was like 9. If I could try and switch the studio to be the on-air studio. So I sort of sat down in the chair and I went, so I'll just press that studio and I'll press take and I'll put the fader up. And just before I was about to take it live, because I do it correctly, the guy comes around and he goes, "Can you not do that, please?" So that's how I got into it, and I've been obsessed with it ever since.
And what's your favourite piece of local radio that you've created?
Oh, that is a tough one. I think the most special for me would probably be my involvement in Bury Pride. I presented that with my co-presenter for Shock and seemingly my radio husband, Josh Reid. And that was quite special for both of us because we're sort of both part of that community, and to be able to sort of broadcast and be free and open and talk about something like that, that was very special. Also, I did an overnight broadcast for the general election, so we were in the Bury count, and the Bury North and the Bury South count was happening live, but also when we were doing that, we were covering the Rochdale count and I think the Hayward and Middleton count as well, and that was so challenging to sort of keep it so local on like election which is so national. But I think we managed it, and I presented it with Joe Marshall, who does stuff for Shock as well, and Charlotte Martin, who also does bits for Shock and also does Roach Valley, and they were brilliant, and I'll remember that forever probably.
Amazing. And obviously I can see your passion for local radio, but why is local radio so important?
Local radio is so important because it involves communities. I think a lot of the national stations now are more UK focused or specific large area focused, but these local radio stations that are now often independent have this community feel to them. They're about, a lot of them are not for profit, and they just want to spread awareness about important causes and get people into radio that wouldn't be able to walk into a commercial radio station or the BBC and just get a job. They offer them a show, or they offer them a way of trying to help and start their careers, and I think it's so important for that, and it's so important for people who are listening, and for local topics to be covered, because they don't get covered as much anymore by those big stations. So it's the job of those independent local radio stations to pick up local causes and shine a light on those causes that maybe aren't spoken about as much anymore.
And does local radio face any challenges at the moment?
It does. It faces a lot of challenges, but for the independent local radio stations, it can also be a bit of a benefit. There is a media bill that has been passed in the last couple of weeks, which means for commercial local radio stations that currently have local content, they can now completely get rid of it and go completely national. So it's it can be seen as a bad thing because these commercial stations aren't maybe seen as being as bothered about local content anymore. But for independent local radio stations, that means they can grab that local market, they can grab the localness and make it their selling point and, you know, go, hey, we're local, we care. So it can be seen as a negative thing in sort of maybe in a commercial level. I know the BBC's had some cuts in the last couple of years, and they're not as local anymore, they're more regional. But I think for the independent side and for these local stations, I think it may be good news because it will get them more exposure for local events that they do.
That's amazing. That's really great news. Right, thank you so much for joining me here in the studio, Ciara. And back to you, Emma and Katie in the studio.